Good morning. As you're watching this, it's Wednesday morning and it's the 26th of May. And I'm actually, I record these the day or the afternoon or even sometimes just before I go to bed at night, the day before, so they can be uploaded early for those who want to get to it early before they go to work or whatever. And I just could not resist coming out here this afternoon on this Tuesday afternoon. It's a beautiful day, and wanted to record out here. And I have some bird background music to go along with it. I have to pay him for that. Today's devotion is entitled Sharing. Remember, we're looking at the early church along with John Stott. This is entitled Sharing. The suggested reading is Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. If you can tell me what that bird is, I'd appreciate it. And the verse at the top is from Acts 2:44. All the believers were together and had everything in common, using the word koinonia, in common. I hope you can hear me over the bird. A few miles east of Jerusalem at that time, the Essene leaders of the Qumran community were committed to the common ownership of property, and the members of the monastic community handed over all their money and possessions when they were initiated. Certainly, Jesus does call some to total voluntary poverty, like the rich young ruler, St. Francis of Assisi and his followers, and Mother Teresa and her sisters, maybe to witness to the truth that a human life does not consist in the abundance of our possessions. It's a good one to remember, that line right there. Human life does not consist in the abundance of our possessions. But not all of Jesus' followers are called to this. The prohibition of private property is a Marxist, not a Christian doctrine. Besides, even in Jerusalem, the selling and the giving were voluntary, for we read in verse 46 that they broke bread in their homes. In their homes? But I thought they had all sold their homes and their furniture. Apparently not. And the sin of Ananias and Sapphira recorded in Acts 5 was not that they kept back part of their property, but that they kept part while pretending to give it all. Their sin was not greed, but deceit. The Apostle Peter was clear in his words to Ananias, quote, "Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal?" Acts 5:4. In other words, all Christians have to make a conscientious decision before God how we use our possessions. Nevertheless, we must not avoid the challenge of this passage. Those early Christians loved one another, which is hardly surprising since the first fruit of the Spirit is love. In particular, they cared for their impoverished brothers and sisters, so they shared with them their goods. This principle of voluntary Christian sharing is surely a permanent one. Those of us who live in affluent circumstances must simplify our economic lifestyle, not because we imagine that this would solve the macroeconomic problems of the world, but out of solidarity with the poor. So its spirit-filled church is a generous church. Generosity has always been a characteristic of the people of God. Our God is a generous God. His people must be generous too. And true enough, we see that in Acts, represented a couple of times, a few times, that they looked out for each other and they sold property. The end of one chapter, and has in chapter 4, has Barnabas selling a piece of property that belonged to him and coming and just giving it to the apostles for them to distribute as needed. And that's what we think leads to Ananias and Sapphira doing what they did. They wanted to be well thought of too. And so they sold a piece of property, said this was, when they presented the money, that was everything. All the money they got from the sale. Unfortunately, they only gave about half of it and kept the rest for themselves and lied. That was the key. Being something you're not is hypocrisy. Acting like you're something you're not is hypocrisy. And that's one of those things that seems to, if it's okay for me to say this, that just seems to get under the skin of God. Those kind of people were the ones who opposed Jesus. They're the ones he was the harshest with. Hypocrites. Woe, you hypocrites, he said on several occasions, because it leads people astray. It misrepresents the Jesus of our salvation. And there's nothing worse than that. To call ourselves a Christian and then in our choices and in our actions and in our behaviors actually deny that reality. We need to be the real deal. The real deal. And I pray that is what we strive to be as we represent Christ in our family, in our workplace, with our neighbors, wherever. That we want to make sure our lives are real in their obedience and their faith in following Jesus. Give him the glory with your life today and every day. Amen.